William J. is a Canadian author, a script writer, and a nationally syndicated humor columnist. William's weekly humor column appears in the Standard, the Review, the Tribune, and the Hamilton Spectator every Thursday. William is also a senior writer for Canada's Forever Young. William has been nominated twice for the prestigious Gemini Award for writing movies for television. He has brought copies of his new book, and that's why I love small town living. I'll have to repeat that. The name of the book is, and that's why I love small town living. His newest book, and that's why I love small town living. In part memoir, but mostly just flat out funny. It is a quaint and touching collection of stories set in a simpler time and generously discounted to $25 for PROBUS members. Let me present William J. Thomas.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you very much, Jim, for that introduction, and I want to thank Duncan McLaren for inviting me to come and speak to you this morning. And I got to tell you, I just love PROBUS. I've spoken to probably 40 PROBUS clubs in the last 5 years, and you people are doing everything right, staying alert, reading newspapers, being curious, bringing in speakers. It's absolutely wonderful. As Dylan Thomas said, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying light. And that, whether you know it or not, that's exactly what you're doing. You people are cheating old age by staying really sharp and having fun. So congratulations to PROBUS. So I'm sorry I missed the front end of Fred's presentation. That was a great presentation, by the way. I really enjoyed it. And in the coming minutes, you'll understand that my presentation is a little different than Fred's, in the sense that his was actually about something. If there's any goddamn thing in my presentation that's serious, I'd like to know about it, okay? So that's that. And just don't get your hopes up. That was a lovely introduction. Do not get your hopes up, because I've been speaking to some seniors groups, and it hasn't always gone that well. I recently spoke to a seniors group up in Halliburton. I love Halliburton. I used to have a cottage at Eagle Lake. I love Halliburton. It's still old school, and it's still rough, gentrified. And they had me come up there and speak to this group, seniors group. And the venue was the Halliburton Fish Hatchery. And the group was carp. I'm not making that up. But plus, the guy that introduced me didn't introduce me, just told a couple lame jokes and pointed at me and said, "Come on up." So they didn't know the first thing about me. They thought I was like a biologist there to talk about the sex life of minnows or something like that. No idea. But it allowed me to tell my favorite Halliburton story, which I will tell you now. And there's a bad word that I have to use. So I'm coming off, I had a book called The Dog Rules Damn Near Everything. It was out a long time ago. And it was a smash hit. It was with Key Porter Publishing. And it was number one on everybody's bestseller list for 49 straight weeks. I'm not sure that's ever been done before. And anyway, Key Porter wants me to come back really quickly with another one to capture the interest of The Dog Rules. And the title of that book was going to be The Cat Rules, Everything Including the Dog. And it was a fairly easy project because I'd written a lot of columns about my two cats and stuff like that, but I still had to nail this thing down. I had a deadline. And I get a call from Fleming College up in Halliburton, and they said, would you come up here in August, and this was already August, and speak to our summer graduates about writing and stuff like that. And normally I'd jump at a chance like that, but I had this damn deadline. I almost said no, and then I said, you wouldn't have a cottage for me, would you? She goes, oh yeah, we got a bunch of cottages. They're for staff, but we can find you a cottage for a week. I'm there. And it was no hell of a cottage, I can tell you. So we get up there, Jake and I, my dog, a big border collie Australian Shepherd, and we get settled into the cottage, and he wants to go for a walk. And as soon as he sees the little margarine tub, empty margarine tub go into my backpack, he knows we're going for a beer. Okay, he knows we're going to some spot. I'm going to hit him a couple times on the margarine, and we're going to. My dog loved beer more than he loved me. So we're walking into Halliburton. It's about a 45-minute walk into town. As I said, it's the hottest day of the year. And I spot this dinky little bar over here. It's an outside bar. This is perfect. I can get him in and like that. And all of a sudden I spot this guy whose nickname should be Trouble. He's eyeing everybody that's walking by. He's got greasy hair. He's angry. He's staring at people. He might be demented. And in the hottest day of the year, he's wearing a fleece-lined sweatshirt. So I start to go into that, oh no, I don't want to mess with this guy. But Jake has already smelled the draft beer tap. We're going in. I can't pull him off. So as I go through the gate, this guy's sitting right here. I'm trying to ignore him, and Jake is pulling on the leash to get to. And I can't help but look at this guy, and he's on the big sweatshirt. Across the top it says International Sarcasm Society. And underneath in smaller letters, it says, yeah, like we need your fucking support. I started laughing so hard. This guy starts laughing. I said, where the hell did you get that sweatshirt? He goes, Buana John's right there. I said, hold the dog. I'll be right back. I went and bought the sweatshirt. I now own that sweatshirt. I can never wear it in public, of course, but I do own that sweatshirt. International Sarcasm Society. So that speaking thing did not go well. Quite a while ago, quite some time ago, I spoke to this agricultural group out in Wellandport. And it was one of those events where everything that could go wrong went wrong. The president who booked me is a no-show. So they have nobody to introduce me. The caterer's late, so everybody's hungry. What else happened? Oh, there was supposed to be a podium for me to speak, and there's no podium. In Wellandport, they sent a guy down to the church in Wellandport, and he kicked in the back door of the church and to get the podium. I'm not making this up. And they brought it back, and I said, oh my God, he broke into a church. They said, it's okay, he's a member of that church. I said, I'm a member of the Meridian Credit Union. Next time I'm a little short on cash. Jesus. So anyhow, this is going real bad. It's going south in a hurry. So they get this guy, Mike, to introduce me, right? So people are late, the food's coming late. And Mike is looking at my standard introduction, and he's shaking his head. He doesn't like what he sees, right? Jesus Christ. So anyhow, and also Mike is reading it out here. So I went and sat beside him. I said, everything okay? He goes, yeah. I said, did you forget your reading glasses? He said, no. Do you think I need some? I said, no, how's this? I'll go outside and hold it up and you can read it through the window. So anyhow, Mike finally gets we get this thing, and Mike introduces me, and he butchers the introduction so bad. He says that I once wrote a book called Gaze, not real bright and damn proud of it. The book was Guys, not real brutal. And so I had to spend the first 10 minutes apologizing to gays, any gays in the audience, that they weren't stupid. That was a mistake. Yeah, I spent 10 minutes apologizing to the gays. And I remember it was so long ago, I was able to say not only gays, not dumb, they're actually smarter than us straight people, because back then they weren't even getting married. Mike eventually introduces me as Wayne Thompson, who happened to be the mayor of Niagara Falls. So then I had to spend another 5 minutes explaining that I was not the mayor of Niagara Falls. I was not the guy that turned, you know, the eighth wonder of the world into a Walmart parking lot with rooms, right? So anyhow, that did not go well. And I have to tell you that one of the most recent ones, I did the speaking thing to Probus in Ajax. And a very lovely lady, it was a mixed group, and a very lovely lady introduced me. And unfortunately, before I got up, she told everybody to turn their devices off. And many of them thought that included their hearing aids. Trust me, that did not go well. So anyhow, right about now, I think you're probably cringing at this thought, because I'm up here speaking, and almost everybody in this group, almost everybody, not Jim Cameron, are afraid to get up and speak in front of a group. In every survey, the number one fear of North Americans is getting up. You've seen this study, is getting up in front of a crowd and making a speech or giving a talk. You know how big that fear is? Number 3 on that list is death. Yeah. Death. Most people would rather die than do what I'm doing at this point right now. And I'm sorry, the question was?
What's number 2?
Number 2, and I work alone, if you don't mind. Number 2 is being trapped in an elevator with Celine Dion, and she feels a song coming on. Some of the other fears of North Americans, and especially Canadians, would be number 4, spotting Premier Doug Ford ahead of you in the all-you-can-eat buffet line. Number 5, you spot Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in a smart car, and you say to yourself, well, that's rather ironic. Number 6, you watch the Toronto Maple Leafs get knocked out of the playoffs in the first round in training camp. Number 7, you step into your shared Uber ride, and Dean Allison and Randy Hilliard are already in the back seat. Number 8, finding out that Maxime Bernier got run over by an unvaccinated Freedom Convoy trucker. Number 9, President Donald Trump takes Canada by military force, but after he meets our Dragon's Den, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, he wants to give it back. And finally, number 10, the biggest fear of Canadians is finding out that Justin Trudeau left his wife for Pierre Poilievre. Trust me, folks, in this world, that could happen. It's a crazy world out there. So I just want to go over a few, I'm very curious about the behavior of men. I've done an unofficial study of them. I wrote a book about them, guys, not real bright and damn proud of it. And I just thought I'd mention a few. Elaine Boozler, a great American comedian, said it best. She said, when women get depressed, they eat chocolates, drink wine, and go shopping. When men get depressed, they invade another country, which is happening way too often. It's been said many times before, behind every successful man is a woman shaking her head and laughing like hell. And in this case, that would be Melania. I have not been so wrong about anything in my writing career than the result of that last election a month ago. I could not. I'm still shocked. I'm still shocked. The only way I think that could have gone down better is if Donald Trump, a convicted felon and a convicted rapist, had named as his vice president Mike Tyson, another convicted felon and a convicted rapist. I think that would have been, and that ticket of Tyson and Trump and Tyson, still 175 million Americans would have voted for that instead of Kamala Harris and her running mate, because America will never allow a woman to become president of the United States. It's just not going to happen. Anyway, I'm still absolutely in shock, but it hasn't, I still have faith in men. And these are some of the men that I have over the years written about, some of my sort of heroes, I guess. Number one is David Zerfla, 21 of Stettler, Alberta. And out in Alberta, of course, they don't have real police, they have Mounties. And David Zerfla was driving all over the road one night, and he got pulled over by the Mounties and was deemed to be fairly impaired. And so they gave him the roadside, but it was enough in Alberta. They got to take you down to headquarters and give you the official breathalyzer. And he had David in the back seat, headed down to headquarters. And the one Mountie turned around because he heard some commotion going in the back seat. And David Zerfla, 21 of Stettler, Alberta, had first removed his underwear and then eaten them, believing that the cotton in the fabric would absorb the alcohol in the bloodstream, and he would be able to pass the breathalyzer when he got downtown. I don't make this stuff up. And whenever men do things like that, I never ask why. I just ask, what if it worked? You know, buffalo chicken wings flavored underwear. Not only could you eat them, you can beat riot, you know? Unbelievable. Men do the damnedest things. One of my other favorites was a man by the name of, we're okay? You probably heard of him, Bronco Nagurski. I'm a bit of an NFL fan. Bronco Nagurski was one of the greatest linemen that ever played. He played for the Chicago Bears. So he was from the Lakehead, from Ontario, Thunder Bay area originally, and he was deemed to be the toughest lineman. Played for the Chicago Bears. He's in the Hall of Fame, Canton, Ohio today. Tough guy. Bronco liked to party a bit, liked to drink a bit. And Bronco liked to drink a lot. And they had a victory party at a restaurant in Chicago after the Bears made the playoffs. And Bronco got a little drunk and he fell out of the window of the restaurant, one floor down, out cold on the sidewalk below. When he came to, there was a cop standing over him. And the cop said, "What the hell happened here?" Bronco said, "I don't know. I just got here myself." There's only a few more, but John Sedagorski was one of my favorite stories. I wrote a column about John, and he was a professional poacher from Wisconsin. And this guy was seriously making a dent in endangered species birds. He was eating everything out there, and it was a real serious problem. And they were after him for a couple of years, and they finally laid a trap and they caught him. They caught him at a campsite. And John Sedagorski was about to sit down to dinner, and he had roasted over the open flame a blue mountain heron and a sandhill crane. So they cuff him, they get him in the car, and the sheriff is taking him down to the station. And the one trooper on the right hand, the passenger, who couldn't contain his curiosity, turned around and he said to Sedagorski, "I got to ask you." He says, "What the hell does crane taste like?" And John did not hesitate 1 second. He said, "Bald eagle." Now with the crane, he was only looking at probation and a fine. Bald eagle being the national bird of the United States, he's now doing jail time and a $10,000 fine. I believe the correct answer was chicken. One of my I hosted an author series, readings at the Rose on Porco, for 20 years, and I only quit about 5 years ago. And it was a wonderful series. We were sold out at 300 people. Maybe some of you ever got to that. We had you did. Thank you very much. We had members from St Catharines, Font Hill. And it was sold out at 300 people every Thursday, last Thursday of the month. And we actually had a waiting list of 150 people trying to get tickets into this. So I had everybody, Margaret Atwood in 3 times, Pierre Burton, Farley, Mollett, and I had Lloyd Robertson. And Lloyd's a lovely guy. Lloyd and I actually sort of became friends. We exchanged emails, and once in a while we talk. He's a lovely man. So way back when, Ellen DeGeneres was given a 1 hour special. It's a long time ago. A 1 hour special on coming out of the closet. Apparently it takes Americans an hour to figure out this, right? Not here, not in Canada. We took one look at the gays things and let's have fun with this. They're getting married, they're having kids, everything's fine. But it took Americans 1 hour to figure out what a lesbian was. So Ellen DeGeneres does this special, and it's carried by CTV, where Lloyd Robertson is. And I don't make this up. And I actually told this story to the Probus group up in North Toronto, where Lloyd, his wife, booked me to speak up there. So Ellen has spent the weekend in New York with this woman, and she's new at this, and it's all kind of awkward. And now they're at the airport, and the woman's flying back to Boston, and it's right at that moment where they might embrace, they might kid, whatever. At that moment, they cut away from the live feed direct to Lloyd Robertson, CTV News, stories we're working on now. They cut to Manitoba and showed a whole bunch of burly guys throwing sandbags at the Red River, which has flooded most of Manitoba and Minnesota. They cut back to Lloyd. He looks into the camera and says, "Will the dikes hold?" I was thinking they probably did, Lloyd, and we missed the whole damn thing. Thank you very much. It's good to see Lloyd is still doing some special work. He's a lovely, lovely man. If you ever get a chance to bring him in, Lloyd's the kind of guy that will probably show up at something like this. So, and finally, one of my heroes, as far as men go, was a pilot on a small plane in England many years ago. I happened to be in London at the time. I used to do a lot of backpacking through Europe, and I'd flown into Heathrow. I love Gatwick, and I did not know that there was a third airport in London. It's called the London City Airport, very small airport, and handles only commuter flights and things like that. While I was in London, this actually happened. A flight came in from Edinburgh, headed for Paris, touchdown, an emergency landing. Everything was fine. The pilot came on and said, "Look, we have a tiny mechanical problem. We are going to be underway within 1 hour. I guarantee it's not a big deal. Anybody that wants to get off the plane, as soon as you go down the steps, there's a little cafeteria building down there, and there's tea and coffee, free scones. Go enjoy yourself." As I said, 1 hour. 40 passengers, 39 of them get off the plane. The one woman didn't get off the plane, was in the back. She was blind. So she asked the flight attendant, could somebody walk her dog? Flight attendant says, "I'll ask the captain." Captain came back, says, "I'm not doing anything anyhow. I love dogs." So the captain takes the dog out along that outside of that building, and the dog, of course, pees 355 times in 4 minutes, right? So he's peeing along here, and it starts to rain a bit. So instead of going back outside the building, the pilot comes from that door through the cafeteria to get back to the stairs to get up to the thing. Do you know when those 39 passengers, yeah, saw the pilot walking down the cafeteria aisle, being led by a seeing eye dog? Nobody would get back on that plane. They called that flight like 4 times and nobody moved. They had to actually bring the captain back and give him sort of an eye chart test before anybody would get on that plane. And still 2 people demanded their money back and 3 took the channel. Men, you gotta love it. So anyhow, Jim was kind enough to mention that, yes, I did bring some books, and I love writing books. I love reading books. I'm a very slow reader, so I go back a lot, and I have a notepad and a pen, and I also have an atlas to figure out where the settings are. I'm a voracious reader, and I think you should. If you're not reading now, you're missing out on one of the greatest pleasures of your life at this stage of your life. I'm listening to this McMaster University woman, and she was fantastic. And she said what I'd had in the back of my mind for a long time, but she articulated, and she said, we are spending so much time in front of our screens, our phones, our TVs, our everything. Not that it's going to damage our brain, it already has. Our brains have been bent. They've been damaged slightly from all the time we're spending looking at our screens. And she said, if you're on your computer, your laptop, and you forget something, good luck going back scrolling through a million words you got in the last 2 days. She said, but if you read a book and you forget something, you can go back and find it. You don't know what page it's on, but you remember it was like top left. She said, you can't do that with your screen. She said, the only way to calm the brain down is to read. So I wrote a column about this, and I used to read, but I read when I had a chance, right? No more. I shut down at 4 o'clock and I read from 4 to 6 every day. After that column, some lovely lady in St. Catharines, and what was her name? Her name was, I will get her name. Anyhow, she started a 4 to 6ers club in St. Catharines. They now have a reading club. They're exchanging books. They're getting together. They're drinking wine. Everybody's having a good goddamn time, but me. And I started the whole thing. You understand? So anyhow, yeah. So reading is very, very important, and it's so enriching. And the things that you learn from books you just don't get from magazines and newspapers. I only remember 2 people in my educational background that ever really made a difference. One, anybody go, oh, I'll bet you Don Walker went to Welland High. Did you go to Welland High, Don? Did you go to Welland High?
Yes.
There you go. Do you remember Mrs. Morrissey? Mrs. Morrissey, little Mrs. Morrissey, sweetest little woman. And English, she taught English, of course. And I think she's the one that got me reading books that weren't on the curriculum. Reading books for the love of reading and learning and like that. Mrs. Morrissey. And Mrs. Morrissey was always trying to increase our vocabulary. And she had one rule. She said, if you say it 3 times, it's yours. If you say it 3 times, you own it. And every time she said that, some demonic voice from the back of the class would go, Brenda, Brenda. That guy's in jail today. I'm sure. How many of you went to Brock? Here, who went to Brock? Yeah, you remember Professor Malcolm Horniansky? 101, that was a long time ago. How old are you? I'm sorry.
85.
I'm 78. And you're absolutely right. Professor Michael Horniansky, we're in 101, all freshmen, 200 people. We were still taking classes in that refurbished plumbing and heating building. And it was all theater seating. Horniansky, Friday morning, is on the stage. He didn't teach English. He acted it. He was a thespian. He had the book Shakespeare out here, and he went side to side with the black gown flowing, and he acted out every character in the play, and you never crossed him. You never said a word. You never whispered in this class. And on this particular Friday, he's going side to side in the robe and out here. And there's a woman down in the front, a little old lady. It's very unusual to see older people at university back then, not now. She's sitting right in the front row, blue hair, glasses, really pleasant woman, and she's knitting. And it's pissing him off something fierce. So he goes to this and he stops right in front of her and he glares at her. Doesn't do any good. She's knitting. She doesn't see him. Back and forth. Finally, he stops dead in front of her and says, looks up at 200 of us freshmen and says, by the way, did you know that knitting is a form of mental masturbation? There was a gasp in the room and a silence. There was a silence. One of my favorite writers used to be Horton Foote, and he once said it was so silent you could hear an ant piss on a pillow. This deathly silence, and this little old lady never looks up, never misses a stitch, and says loud enough for all of us to hear, Professor Horniansky, why don't you do it your way and I'll do it mine? It was unbelievable. It was like the reaction to 200 kids. was like the noise, the laughter. It was like one of those things you see on CNN of a Mexican prison riot, right? Oh my God! And Horyatsky tried to get control of the class and finally he just threw up his hands, laughed like hell, and said, "See you next week," and he was done. I often wonder whatever happened to that woman. So anyhow, yes, I do like books. I like funny book titles. I think I've got a funny book title here, and we'll find out. But I used to love Lou Grizzard. Lou Grizzard was a redneck columnist of the United States. He was syndicated. How many remember Arthur Black? Arthur Black died just, Arthur Black was a friend of mine. He died about 3 years ago. And at one point, Arthur Black and I split Canada. He was in 55 newspapers, a humor column, and I was in about 52. And Arthur Black was a lovely man. He was so generous that I was his competitor, and yet he had me on his show. So I used to do Saturday mornings, Basic Black, CBC Radio. Right? So we both liked Lou Grizzard, and Lou Grizzard was an American, but he was a funny guy. And I love Lou Grizzard's book titles. His first book was Elvis is Dead, and I Don't Feel So Hot Myself. And then he followed that up with a book, the title of which was Don't Bend Over in the Garden, Granny. You know them taters have eyes. And the final book that Lou Grizzard wrote, and I don't get it, but I like it. Shoot lower, boys. They're riding Shetland ponies. Cynthia Heimel was a funny woman and an American who wrote some very funny books. The title of her first book was If You Can't Live Without Me, Why Aren't You Dead Yet? And her last book, she followed that book up with Get Your Tongue Out of My Mouth, I'm Kissing You Goodbye. Cynthia Heimel, not somebody I'd be anxious to go camping with. And I always thought Roseanne Barr's a great line about men would make for a great book title. The main title would be Only a Man Can Read a Map. And then the subtitle would be Because Only a Man Can Imagine 1 inch equals 10 miles. 1 inch equals 10 miles. Anyhow, listen, this is, I'm looking forward to a few questions, but this is my last book and my latest book. I hope it's, but you know, at our age, this could be my last book. So if you buy it, it could be worth a lot of money a year from now after you're dead. So anyway, I wasn't sure about the title. I like the title, but I wasn't sure about the cover. So I took it down to Wainfleet Post Office and old Elsie. She's been there forever since they built the damn place. And by the way, Canada Post, this is a $30 book. Canada Post wants $18.95 to put it in the mail. Yeah, Canada Post makes $8 more off this book than I did, and I wrote it. So I go to Elsie, and Elsie's she, as I said, she's large, she's loud, she's bored, and she's been there forever. And I'm always reminded, I used to have this collection of really screwed up newspaper headlines, you know, Lost, Eastern Beagle, No Tail, Blind in One Eyes, only has 3 legs, answers to the name of Lucky, right? Those things. And I remember one, my parents are from Schumacher and Timmins. My father was a miner in McIntyre Mines. And I remember the headline I once came across of the Timmins Times was, miners refuse to work after death. And I remember thinking, I don't know why, it's never stopped Elsie from going to the Wainfleet Post Office. You know, she's there every day. So I said to her, after she gives me the bad news about how much it's going to cost to put in this mail, I said, Elsie, I'm just a little wondering about this. You read this title and see if it works. And she says, and that's why I looked at the background is there's a church here. And up here is the signboard for the sermons, who's coming up this Sunday. So it says up here, and that's why I love small town living. And Elsie says, yeah, and she looks at Sunday sermon, 10 o'clock, Reverend Robert Williams, if you hate sin, come in. She says, yeah, it's okay. I said, no, Elsie, you got to read the whole thing because there's a little tag. Somebody put a tag. Now she gets pissed off. Now she's reading loud. She says, and that's why I love small town living. Sunday sermon, 10 o'clock, Reverend Robert Williams. Topic, if you hate sin, come in. And if you don't, call Rita, 868-34. I thought she was gonna hurt herself. So that's when I knew I had a funny book title. So that's it. It's a very funny book. I'm not going to get into it. We've had way too much good time here today. It's a very funny book. It's all Niagara. It's growing up in Dane City in Welland, where I did for 17 years. I've lived on the lake near the Rathmon Inn on right on the shoreline for 40 years until the storms drove me out. Couldn't take it anymore 5 years ago. And I now live on the quarry in Port Colborne up by Cement Plant Road. And it's a beautiful, quiet area. And it's like living in Muskoka. It's really quite nice. So these are all they're extremely funny stories about small town living. And I hope you enjoy that. Anyhow, thank you very much. I don't have to tell you a lot about how you live your lives, because anybody that belongs to Probus is doing a lot of good. Just live lightly, laugh a lot, and remember the words of the great American comedian Red Skelton, who said, "You might as well laugh. Nobody's getting out of this one alive." Anyhow, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Okay. So we're gonna do some questions, yeah? We've got time?
Tom's got a question.
There we go.
I was on the waiting list for the Port Colborne and Andre series for 3 or 4 years.
Right. Oh, really? Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it. Really.
It was a great night.
And I stopped about 5 years ago. Is it still going on?
No, I left, and it folded. It went on for about 2 years, but they dropped a lot of attendance. It just became harder and harder, and then COVID and stuff like that. So no, it does not. But that was a wonderful series. I remember it's just bringing Pierre Burton into Port Colborne. And I knew Pierre by this time, and he was getting pretty frail. And we would take all the authors to Lucy's Cafe restaurant, Italian restaurant on the east side. And it was February, and he was with his agent. And I told him, I said, we were having a conversation, and I said, if you have to go to the washroom, it's outside. He thought that was really funny. Have you ever been to Lucy's? Washrooms outside? No, you have to go out this door and then out and then into another door. So Pierre has to take a pee. So he gets up, and I immediately grab him, and then we go, and I open the door, and the snow blows in, and he turns around and he says, "Hey, this guy wasn't kidding." So we get Pierre out there, and then we're having dinner, and there's a drunk couple in the corner, and you can't miss Pierre Burton, he's 6'8", 6'8" and something. And the drunk guy doesn't know who he is, but the woman does. And finally, they exchange words, and the guy comes over, slaps Pierre Burton on the back, and says, "So, Peter, you written anything good lately?" And I thought, oh my God, he's never going to come back to this town ever, ever, ever. Anyhow, it was a really good. It was a good go. I did 20 years of that, and yeah, it was really rewarding to hear these people come and speak. The biggest regret was I never videotaped it. Can you imagine? We had every author that was anybody in there, and I'd love to have those. Just never did it. Here we go.
First of all, I'm from Fawn Hill,
Uh-huh.
and I heard you a number of years ago at Fawn Hill Library, and you were very good then, and you're very good now.
That was kind of you to say that. Thank
However, you made a reference to Dean Allison, and maybe you should explain that to these people, because Dean Allison is my federal MP. He's not there, I don't think.
No, I have nothing against Dean Ellison or in Randy Hillier. It's just they seem to do things that get them into the papers all the time, not in a good way. That's all. What you hit on was we're all old enough to remember when politics was politics. It was about government, it was about policy, and religion had nothing to do. Politics is now the hate game. If you're on the left, people on the right hate you. it's, we're watching in real time the destruction of one of the greatest democracies in history. The United States of America is coming apart down the middle, right to left, hate both ways. And it's got two choices that I see. Separation, in which some of the smarter states, New York, New England, and things like that, they will band together and form their own trading groups and maybe their own security. The hillbilly states, Alabama, Georgia, that will be one. California, Oregon, that they're going to be about 4 or 5. That's one option. And the second one is civil war. And there are hundreds of militias in the United States, right-wing, ultra-right militias that are way better armed than the local FBI office. So in my estimation, it'll come down to which way the military jumps. Will they go with Trump and do what he says and maybe invade Canada? Or will they take him down? Will a couple of generals get together and postpone democracy for a year until they can hit the reset button? That's just me, but I'm telling you, I was on to Trump probably 8 years ago when he first even was thinking of running, and I've been writing columns, and I went back over some of those columns, some of the most outrageous things that I said in those columns. He did. One thing he didn't do, and I said the first thing he would do as president of the United States in the first term, was he'd take that woman who's the Statue of Liberty, breast implants. So far, he hasn't done that. But that's all he hasn't done. Sorry, I didn't want to turn this into a Trump bash thing, but anyhow. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Again, thank you very much for your time. That was good. There we go. Okay.